You're listening to Overwatch League Daily, your daily source for Overwatch League news, scores, and more. Here's your host, KickedTripod.
Hey, Overwatch League fans, here's the rest of the episode with my interview with Sideshow. Tomorrow, I'm going to have Trevor May on. We're talking about professionalism in Overwatch League. But without further ado, here is the rest of my interview with Sideshow. So, since you bring that up, I think something that's been kind of interesting to me with Overwatch League is this idea of endurance, right? The idea that we are playing 40 games now over 20 weeks, a little bit more with all this stuff. And you've got a lot of emotions. You've got a lot of perseverance and endurance. Do you think that there are some teams that I don't want to just peg Dallas Fuel with this because it's not just the fuel, but we're seeing a lot of teams that, seem to be kind of pretty emotional and maybe lack the ability to endure kind of week over week of maybe not so sporting beatings, I guess.
Yes, for sure.
Do you think like that's kind of also kind of highlighting a different aspect of players and teams that maybe we haven't seen in Overwatch in the past? And if we have, probably the most would be in Apex, which most of these teams didn't play in, especially consistently, unless they're the all-Korean rosters we're seeing now.
Yeah, and people thought it would be the Korean teams that were perhaps struggling because they're moving over to Los Angeles. The culture is pretty different. They are not forced to speak English, but if they want to go out and do things on their own, they're going to run into people who would expect them to speak English, unless they're just chilling Koreatown all the time. But I think the improvement in infrastructure when we consider what the Western teams were doing in Apex compared to the Korean teams here is just worlds apart. Like, it's actually just such a different environment. So it's not really the Korean teams that have ended up struggling. I think they have the coaching structure and just the individual mentality of grinding and being able to look at every game as a fresh game to really persevere. I think it is what we would consider the more Western teams that are going to struggle with this, particularly the guys that were used to playing in tournaments all the time or having that very immediate gratification if you win a tournament. If you are playing tournaments all the time and you win some, you lose some, but you always get that the tension that builds up throughout the tournament and then the payoff at the end or the disappointment at the end that then fires you up to do well the next time. That's a very different feeling to just kind of clocking in and playing your game, and then you sit back and you consider how that affected the overall standings. It's much more drawn out, this system, and I would definitely agree that it requires different kind of mental skills to be able to handle that. The pressure seems to be less, but the necessity for consistency and not getting burnt out or frustrated by a poor beginning or a poor run of form halfway through the season. These are things that a lot of the teams are going to have to deal with. And I think that is really going to make the difference for a lot of teams, especially in the lower half of the pack. Playoffs towards the end are going to be a different beast, though, because essentially once you qualified for playoffs, you are just in a single elimination tournament. And at that point, it's a different set of skills again. At that point, it's about being able to look you out along the bracket, fire yourself up, feel like you're winning, get the momentum, stuff like this. You kind of want that aspect when you get towards playoffs, but you have to finish top 6 to be able to get there. And some of these teams at the moment are not looking likely.
So I want to look forward for a second. We're halfway through stage 2. We're coming up on halfway through the season, believe it or not. And I saw a thread on the competitive Overwatch subreddit about what they want to see for the All-Star weekend. I personally voted for Reinhardt hammers swinging at Junkrat bombs for home run derbies. So that was mine. But so Jeff Kaplan can make that happen. But over the next few weeks, we're going to see, hopefully, Shanghai, the Florida Mayhem. Again, hopefully, we're going to see Sinatra coming in for the Shock. We're going to see some new coaching staff. coming in for especially these bottom three teams, at least where they're sitting right now in the standings. Yeah. These teams are sitting there on the bottom. Do you think that these players, these staff changes can really have the type of impact that fans and the teams really hope that they will have on the team overall, as far as the standings go and the longevity, the viability of the team competitively?
Yeah, well, there's the hitch, isn't it? Because if all the Shanghai Dragons fans want is for their team to look a lot better and to be performing with, at the level of a mid-table team, then sure. I think the addition of three Korean players and then Sky, the Chinese flex support, could definitely just revamp the team. That could be just a total new look for them. But they're so far in the hole at the moment. Do I think that's going to make a significant difference to the standings? I mean, do you care if you're the 12th place team or you're the 10th place team? Maybe if you're the Shanghai Dragons. But really what you're after is getting into the playoffs at the end, right? That is the end goal of all of these teams, is to make it to the playoffs. And then you want to try and get as far as you can and potentially win it. And unfortunately, Shanghai Dragons have had such an appalling start to the beginning of the season that it seems incredibly unlikely that they're going to be able to turn this around. Because even if they ended up being as good as like the Philadelphia Fusion or LA Valiant or whatever, they would be battling with them for the 6th place slot with such a disadvantage, such a handicap. It's like they've just asked everybody else to start piling on wins, and then they're like, I think we can wait until week 7 before we start with our real roster. You just wouldn't do that, and you wouldn't expect to see success if you did that. So yes, I do think that these 4 players that Shanghai have added are probably very good. I think Fearless is fantastic. I was really high on him when he was playing in Element Mystic. I think Addo is a very good addition to the team because it's the perfect addition to play alongside either Dia or Undead, because he plays the Genji and the Tracer, so they can play a mixture of those compositions, plays them both pretty well. Sky is a very good player. I would say probably the 2nd best flex support in China behind Shy, which is ridiculous because the 2 best flex supports in China are now called Sky and Shy, which is just the dumbest thing in the world. Why did Zufan change his name to that? Who knows? But I think Shy is too young at the moment. And then Giguri, although was kind of like a mediocre tank the last time we saw her in Apex, has been placing super high on the ladder, and we haven't seen her in that long. So I'm fairly positive about how good she'll be, especially when you pair her up with Fearless. I think that could be really good. So I think this team should be pretty good. I think coming into it, as long as they click, as long as they gel with whatever couple of Chinese players or 3 Chinese players that they end up playing with in the team. Obviously, I'm assuming they all get starting spots because they're better than the people they're replacing. I think that they could be contending with like the Gladiators, the Fuel. Really, they should be beating guys like the Shock with their current roster. But I don't know whether it'll make a big difference to the standings. Florida Mayhem is just like mental. I don't understand why they've picked these guys up. It's very strange to me that they've picked up Awesome Guy and as a Slayer player and this kind of stuff. But I guess they're trying to. The head coach that they just got, Ryder, played for Meta Athena, or was rather a coach for Meta Athena. These 2 guys have come from Meta Athena, so maybe there's some hidden synergy or hidden understanding of the problems there for Florida Mayhem. Who knows? Because they've been very disappointing compared to the peaks that they've had as a team. And for San Francisco Shock, I think that Super and Sinatra will be big additions to the team. I think they'll fix a lot of the issues that we've seen from the San Francisco Shock. They'll rearrange the calling structure, which has been poor from the Shock. They'll add potentially a new main tank, which has been poor from the Shock. They'll have a more aggressive DPS partner to take some pressure away from Baby Bay or whoever else fills in that flex support, DPS slot, whatever the rumors may be floating around at the moment.
Right.
So I think that in theory has a good potential, but by the time they find out, the mid-season signing period will be over. So they have one shot, one opportunity, and hopefully Super wants spaghetti all over the place.
Yeah. Well, I mean, the Shock are interesting, right? And obviously, I mean, yeah, you and Harsha go a ways back with Through the Grapevine, and man, that again, another disturbing Twitter video that I'll never get out of my head. Thank you very much.
Did you know that grapes don't float?
Really?
Blew my mind.
Really? I feel like I need to.
They all sank to the bottom of the bath.
I need to go rewatch VeggieTales because I feel that there's a few times where grapes float in that movie, or TV show. So we'll have to see. But
it's the media spreading lies into the minds of our children again about floating grapes.
Unbelievable. I used to have really creative titles for the shows, and that would be it. Grapes don't float. But the Shock have I would say one of the most bold strategies, like the two teams that I think of as really bold strategies when it comes to Overwatch League would be the San Francisco Shock and the Boston Uprising. And I'm sure that there's people I'm missing and not thinking of, but those two come immediately top ahead. San Francisco Shock, incredibly young, right? They're the youngest team in Overwatch League. We had Legit RC on the show a few weeks back, and that was something that he really emphasized is we got a lot of young players, and they did, right? I mean, you've got Dante, obviously Sinatra and Super, who aren't even old enough to play, Sleepy, just barely old enough to play. There's a lot of room for growth there, and it's kind of really interesting to see these teams take. You've got kind of the wholehearted approach of let's pick up an existing roster that dominated before Overwatch League. Let's get some wins now and hopefully continue to win in the future, augment whatever. You can think of the three Korean rosters really as that. And you've got this kind of hybrid thing where like the Dallas Fuel did that, the Houston Outlaws with the FN or GFE core. And then you've got these just a few teams who said, you know what, let's make something almost incredibly brand new. And it's really interesting to see how these teams are all kind of settling. If you can even use the word settling when you're only talking about being 8 weeks into, a 20-week season into a league that hopefully goes on for forever and ever.
Yes, and this is when you look at where they're actually standing in Stage 2 playoffs or overall playoffs as well, overall standings as well, the teams that just kind of tried to, or rather the coaches or whatever, that tried to come up with brand new rosters. So LA Gladiators was a brand new roster formed from 3 pairs, essentially. San Francisco Shock was brand new. Boston was brand new, and Shanghai Dragons. Those are the 4 ones that were kind of... Oh, and the Philadelphia Fusion as well. Apart from the Philadelphia Fusion, all of the rest of them have had real ups and downs. Boston currently in a down, whereas we would have said that they were up. But this, to me, was always going to be an incredibly risky venture, just deciding that I am the all-powerful creator of this team, and I'm going to use my divine intelligence to be able to craft a team. Whereas all of the other ones, it was in some sense like natural selection. They had gone through the process of winning tournaments or failing at tournaments and changing pieces until they had making little mutations of their rosters until they came up with things that actually worked. So it was a very different design philosophy, and I thought it was much more risky to try and make these teams. Philadelphia Fusion have had good success. Boston Uprising did have good success. The rest have all kind of flumped.
Yeah, it's going to be really interesting to see. Sideshow, I know I've already taken way more of your time than I promised I would, and I know you're busy.
No problem at all.
I hope your cardboard box doesn't break and you're...
I have many cardboard boxes.
Okay, well, that's good.
They're always replaced.
Yeah, you can bill me for that cardboard box. I promise. I'm good on it. But thank you so much for joining us. Enjoy this week in Overwatch League. We really appreciate you stopping by and dropping some of that Overwatch League knowledge on us.
Oh, thank you very much for having me.